Daf Yomi Menachos Tractate Menachos, page 75. Daf Ayin Hey, top of the page. Ma'kan, with the words Ma'kan. Ma'kan Matan Shem Mechli, Af Lahalan Matan Shem Mechli, Ma Lahalan Yitzika Ubalilo, Afkan Yitzika Ubalilo. Just as here with regard to the deep pan meal offering, the placement of oil is in an empty utensil is required, to which the flour is added only afterward. So too there, with regard to the meal offering prepared in a shallow pan, the placement of oil in an empty utensil is required. And just as there, with regard to the meal offering prepared in a shallow pan, pouring and mixing are required, as the verse states, mix with oil and pour oil upon it, Leviticus 2, 5-6. So too here, with regard to the deep pan, meal offering, pouring and mixing are required. Chalos, bolila, divrei Rabbi, v'chachomim oimrim soiles. The Mishnah teaches with regard to meal offerings that come as loaves, meaning those prepared in a shallow pan or deep pan, or those baked in an oven. It is after the flour has been baked into loaves that one breaks them into pieces and mixes them with oil. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And the rabbis say it is with fine flour before the baking that one mixes the oil. Tanu Rabbanan, soilis belula benam shiniv, leles besoilis. Rabbi Oimer chalos beoilulan, shenemar chalos beluis. Amar lo, ve'alo lach mitoida nemar, oen chalois, v'yev shalamoilulan keshen chalois, ele soiles. The sages taught in a braita with regard to the meal offering prepared in a shallow pan. The verse states it shall be of fine flour and leaven mixed with oil. This teaches that it is mixed with still flour. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says it is after the flour has been baked into loaves that he mixes them, as it is stated, and when you bring a meal offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened loaves of fine flour mixed with oil. Leviticus 2:4. The rabbi said to him, but it is not with regard to loaves of a thanks offering that it is stated, unleavened loaves mixed with oil and loaves mixed with oil of fine flour soaked, Leviticus 7:12, and it is not possible to mix them when they are loaves, but only when they are fine flour. Ketzad oise noisin shem mechli koidim nasiyosan v'noisino v'noisin shem oleh v'lo sho v'oipo upoisiso v'noisin oleh shem koimis. The Gemara explains the procedure of mixing the oven-baked meal offerings according to the rabbis. How does the priest perform the rite? He places oil in a utensil before the placement of the fine flour is done. And then he places the fine flour into the utensil. And then he places oil upon it and mixes it and kneads it in lukewarm water and bakes it in a shallow pan or a deep pan in accordance with his vow. And then he breaks it into pieces, and he again places oil upon the pieces, which constitutes the required pouring. And he removes a handful for the altar. Rabbi Oimer, chalos poilon shenema chalos belulus b'shemen ketzad oise noisin shemen mechli koidim nasiyoso noisin l'lasho yoipa poiseso v'noisin le'ashemen v'voilila v'choizo v'noisin le'ashemen v'koimis. Yehuda Hanasi says, after the meal offerings have been baked into loaves, one breaks them into pieces and mixes them with oil. As it is stated, loaves of fine flour mixed with oil. How does the priest perform the rite? He places oil in a utensil before the placement of the flour is done, and then he places the flour into the utensil. Then he kneads it in lukewarm water and bakes it in the shallow pan or deep pan and breaks the loaves into pieces and places oil upon the pieces and mixes them, and again places oil upon the pieces, which constitutes the pouring of the oil, and removes a handful to be burned on the altar. Just one moment here, we'll pause. Vaitel Efshar di Kamri le Rabbanan Rabbi Mahi Mashmur bar Rabbi Yitzchak Revis Shemeni Heich Chalekes Lechama Chalois. The Gemara asks with regard to the difficulty that it is not possible to mix them when they are loaves, which the rabbi said to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, what is it that makes it impossible? The Gemara answers that Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak says, since only a quarter log of oil is used, how could it be divided among a number of loaves? As this is not sufficient oil to mix with baked offerings, it must be that the oil is mixed with the unbaked flour. Chalois tunois belilo urikikin meshicha tanu abonon chalois belulois urikikin belulin shiyochoil velo edinhu uma chalois shenan tunois meshicha tunois belilo urikikin shitunu meshicha enoidin shitunu belilo tavaloi mal chalois belulois urikikin belulin. The Mishnah teaches the loaves of the meal offering, baked in an oven, require mixing of their flour with oil, and wafers require only smearing. The sages taught in a Braita, the verse specifies with regard to the oven-baked meal offering, and when you bring a meal offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened loaves, the fine flour mixed with oil, Leviticus 2:4. This indicates that only the loaves are mixed, but the wafers are not mixed. This derivation is necessary, as one might have thought could the opposite conclusion not be derived through logical inference, and if loaves, which do not require smearing, do require mixing, then is it not logical that wafers, which require smearing, also require mixing? To counter this inference, the verse states, loaves of fine flour mixed, but wafers are not mixed. Rekikim mishuchin, ve'lo echalois mishuchois yochol ve'lo dinhu. Uma rekikin shenan tunin belilo, tunin mishicho, chalois shetunis belilo, eno din shunis mishicho, shetunis mishicho. Talmud lomar, rekikin mishuchin ve'lo echalois mishuchois. With regard to wafers, the same verse teaches that wafers are smeared with oil, but loaves are not smeared. This derivation is necessary, as one might have thought. Could the opposite conclusion not be derived through logical inference? Namely, and if wafers which do not require mixing do require smearing, then is it not logical that loaves which require mixing also require smearing? To counter this inference, the verse states that wafers are smeared with oil, but loaves are not smeared. My Talmuda Amarove La Lishtemit Vilichtov Chalos Mishuchas Urikikim Belulin. The Gemara asks, what is the biblical derivation? Why are the terms mixed and smeared not interpreted to be referring to both varieties of oven-baked meal offerings? The Gemara answers, Rava said, if this were the intention, then the Torah should not omit this description completely and let it write in some other verse, smeared loaves and mixed wafers. The fact that the Torah never describes the loaves as smeared and wafers as mixed indicates that loaves are not smeared and wafers are not mixed. Keitzad moishchon kimin ki V'shah ne'echon v'chulei mai kamin Amar Rav Kahana kamin ki yevoni. Kai, letter Kai. I once studied the Greek alphabet, and I remember that letter Chi. It's an X. The Mishnah teaches how does one smear oil on them. He does so in a shape similar to a key. The rest of the Chi, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the priest. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of similar to key? Rav Kahana said is smeared in a shape similar to the Greek letter Chi, which is an X. Tanobanon min chaba mechetzo chalois umechtor kikin maybe no shemin. Concerning the mixing of oil into the loaves and the smearing of oil upon the wafers, the sages taught in Braita, an oven baked meal offering that comes as half loaves and half wafers, meaning 5 of each, may be brought according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who does not require 10 items of a uniform type. How is the oil applied to this offering? According to one opinion, he brings a log of oil, which is the requisite quantity, to accompany a tenth of an ephah of flour, and divides it into 2 parts. Half of the oil is used for the loaves, and half of the oil is used for the wafers. ושאר השמן מחזיר לחלויס. רבי שמעון בן יהודה משום רבי שמעון אומר, מויש חון כבן כי, ושאר השמן לאכול לכהנים. As for the loaves, he mixes them with the oil, and as for the wafers, he smears them, and he smears the oil on the wafer over the entire surface, not in the shape of a letter key, and he returns the rest of the oil to mix with the loaves. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, he smears them in a shape similar to letter key, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the priest. Tanya idoch, rekikin aboy v'nei maybe log shemen moishchan, v'choyzon moishchan ad sheyichle kol shemen moishchan. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda omer, v'shum Rabbi Shimon moishchan k'min ki, v'shor shemen echol kohanim. It is similar. It is taught in another Braita in the case of 10 wafers that come by themselves as a meal offering baked in the oven, and not as part of another offering. He brings a log of oil and smears them, and he again smears them repeatedly until all the oil in the log is finished. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, he smears them in a shape similar to the letter Chi, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the priests. That's the end of the Talmud. Now for the new Mishnah. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 word Mishnah. This is the whole Mishnah. Kol haminachos hana'asos b'chli te'unos pesisa. That's it. Whole Mishnah. All the meal offerings that are prepared in a vessel require breaking into pieces. All the meal offerings that are prepared in a vessel require breaking into pieces. The Gemara says, the Gemara has to exclude what does the Mishnah state that this halacha applies specifically to meal offerings prepared in vessels. Rav Papa said the Mishnah serves to exclude the 2 loaves, meaning the public offering on Shavuot of 2 loaves baked from new wheat, and the showbread, the 12 loaves that were placed on the table in the sanctuary each Shabbat. Since these are baked in an oven and not prepared in vessels, they do not require breaking into pieces. Tanu Rabbanon, Pasatoiso piti mincho, the rabois kolaminachois lepsiso, Yochol shani marbe af shtei alechem alechem abonim tamalonoso. The sages taught in Braita that the verse discussing a meal offering prepared in a pan states, you shall break it into pieces and pour oil upon it. It is a meal offering. Leviticus 2:6. The fact that the verse concludes with the phrase, it is a meal offering, indicates that the Torah means to include all the meal offerings in the requirement of breaking into pieces. One might have thought that I should include even the 2 loaves and the showbread. Therefore, the verse states, "You shall break it in pieces," meaning the meal offering is baked in a pan, but not the 2 loaves and the showbread. Yatzakto sheben mincho l'rabbis kol menachos liyitzika yochel shani marmeh af mincha me'api. Tamalo ma'aleh shemen. The writer continues. That the same verse states, "And you shall pour oil upon it. It is a meal offering." The fact that the verse concludes with the phrase "it is a meal offering" indicates that the Torah means to include all meal offerings in the requirement of pouring. One might have thought that I should include even the oven baked meal offering. Therefore, the verse states, "And you shall pour oil upon it," meaning upon this meal offering, but not upon the oven baked meal offering. The writer concludes, perhaps I should exclude only the loaves from the requirement of pouring, but I should not exclude the wafers. Therefore, the verse states it is meal offering, indicating that wafers are also excluded. The Gemara asks, what is the biblical derivation by which the term "it" excludes wafers specifically? Perhaps I will say the term serves to exclude the meal offering of the priests from the requirement of pouring. Continuing on to 75b for one complete massive daf. A little bit ambitious, but let's go for the gold. Top of 75b. Amarabo, Eizehu Dovo Shetzorch Shnei Mutin Hare Oimer Zumincha Me'afe. Rabbah says this is the reason that wafers are also excluded from the midst of pouring, while a meal offering brought by a priest is not excluded. The verse uses 2 expressions of exclusion: upon it, and it is a meal offering. What is the matter that requires 2 exclusions? You must say it is the oven-baked meal offering, of which there are 2 types of offerings: wafers and loaves. New Mishnah. Minchas Yisrael koife lechan l'shnayim, shnayim ne'arbo. Umavdil minchas kohanim koife lechan l'shnayim, shnayim ne'arbo. Eino mavdil Minchas Kohen Mashiach lo haya mikapelo. Amar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Minchas Kohen u'Minchas Kohen Mashiach ein bohem bsiso, mipnei she'ein bohem kmitza, v'chol she'ein bohem kmitza ein bohem bsiso, v'chulen poisem k'zeisim. The Mishnah says, in breaking the meal offering of an Israelite into pieces, the priest folds 1 into 2 and 2 into 4 and separates it at the folds. In breaking into pieces the meal offering of priests, the priest folds 1 into 2 and 2 into 4 and does not separate it at the folds. Because no handful is removed, separation is unnecessary. In the case of the griddle cake meal offering of the anointed priest, he would fold it. Rabbi Shimon says, in neither the meal offering of priests nor the meal offering of the anointed priest is there breaking into pieces, because in those meal offerings there is no removal of a handful. And any meal offering in which there is no removal of a handful, but there is no breaking into pieces, in all meal offerings they're broken into pieces, the priest breaks them into all of bulk size pieces. Okay, Gemara. Tanurabanan pares yochel l'shnayim tamaloim lo pitim. Ipitim yochel yasena perurim tamaloim oiso. With regard to the difference between the meal offering of an Israelite and that of a priest detailed in the Mishnah, the sages taught in Bride to the verse states, "You shall break it into pieces." Leviticus 2:6. One might have thought that it should be broken into only 2 pieces. Therefore, the verse states, "Break it in pieces," indicating that each of these 2 pieces is subsequently broken into more pieces. If the Torah requires pieces, one might have thought that you should repeatedly break it into pieces until he renders it into crumbs. Therefore, the verse states, break it, meaning break it in pieces. And do not break it in its pieces to additional pieces. Okay? Minchas Yisrael koy v'lechel shnayim v'shnayim lama mavdil. Minchas koyanim koy Mashiach v'mekablo v'chuli. V'hoanan tinan lo hoya mekablo merabo. In mekablo merabo. Al mekablo shnayim. How so? In the case of the meal offering of an Israelite, the priest folds 1 into 2 and 2 into 4 and separates the pieces. In breaking into pieces the meal offering of the priest and the anointed priest, the priest folds it into 2 as it is stated. In broken pieces you shall sacrifice the offering. Leviticus 6:14. The Gemara asks, with regard to the meal offering of the anointed priest, didn't we learn in the Mishnah he would not fold it? Rabbah says he does not fold it into 4, as it does not use the doubled phrase, you shall break it into pieces. Patot ota pitim. But he does fold it into 2. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, Minchas koyan Minchas koyan Mashiach ein vahem pesisa. Amar Yosef, Hai chavitza deis bei pirurin kezais mivachinan alea moitzilech min haaretz iles bei pirurin kezais. The Mishnah teaches, Rabbi Shimon says, in neither the meal offering of priests nor the meal offering of the anointed priest is there breaking into pieces. And in all meal offerings that are broken into pieces, one breaks them into olive bulk pieces. Rabbi Yosef said over this cooked dish, which contains pieces of bread that are the size of an olive bulk, before eating one recites upon it the blessing of who brings forth bread from the earth over that same cooked dish. If it does not contain pieces of bread that are the size of an olive bulb, before eating it, one recites upon it the blessing of who creates various kinds of nourishment. Boire mine mizoinois. Amar Rav Yosef. By the way, Rav Yosef is Gematria Mashiach. This you should know. 358. Amami alo. Tanyo, Oimer, Hoya Oimer, du Makri, Menachot Yerushalayim. Oimer, Baruch Shechianu Gimonu. Not to Lach, and Oimer, Moisilech min haaretz. Snan Mechulam Bisim Michazayis. Rabbi Yosef said, from where do I say this halacha? As is taught in the bride the first time an Israelite would stand and instruct a priest to sacrifice meal offerings in Jerusalem on his behalf. He would recite, Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us life and sustained us and brought us to this time, as it is the first time that the Israelite fulfills the mitzvah of bringing that offering, following the removal of the handful. When the priest would take the meal offerings in order to eat them, he would recite the blessing of who brings forth bread from the earth. And we learned in the Mishnah, and in all meal offerings that are broken into pieces, the priest breaks them into pieces the size of an olive bulk. This proves that over pieces of bread that are the volume of an olive bulk, one recites the blessing of who brings forth bread from the earth. Yosef. But according to the Tana of the school of Rabbi Shmuel, who said, with regard to meal offerings, he crushes them continuously until he restores them to the form that they had when they were flour. Would you say that so too? In that case, one who eats a meal offering so prepared does not recite the blessing of who brings forth bread from the earth? Niket michulun kezayis v'micholoi im chometu anush kores imazuhu adam yoytzim henich was b'Pesach. Pesach coming up, and if you would say that indeed one does not recite the blessing over these meal offerings, that is difficult. But isn't it taught in a Braita with regard to one who gathered a portion, the volume of an olive bulk, from all of the crumbs of the meal offerings and ate of it, if it was an offering of leavened bread, like that of a thanks offering, and he ate it on Passover, his act is punishable by karet. If it was an offering of unlimited bread, a person fulfills the obligation to eat a mitzvah on Passover, to eat matzah on Passover, to the consumption of those pieces. This indicates that pieces of bread, regardless of their volume, are always considered bread. Rav Yosef answered him that this is not the halacha, and one does not recite a blessing over crumbs of bread as he would over actual bread. Rather, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case when one kneaded the crumbs of bread together and pressed them into a single mass. Okay, let's continue. Hihachi, hainu tanya lavehod, shochem bechleyachias pras, ishe roson sheochlo miboyle, elach v'vayeskinan bebo elechem gadol. Wow, I thought this Amr was much bigger. It's actually finishing very soon. Now the Gemara challenges this. If so, that which is taught about the ruling in the bright, this is the halacha when he ate all of the crumbs that constitute the volume at all bulk in the time it takes to eat a half loaf of bread. It is difficult, as if it is a case where he pressed them into a single mass, the bright should have taught, when he ate it in the singular as it is a single item. Rather, what are we dealing with here? We are dealing with a case where the crumbs came from a large loaf of bread, although the crumbs themselves are each smaller than an olive bulk. Since they were broken from a large loaf, they are considered significant. Mai haviale Allah of Sheshis Omar afilu peruin she'en bohem kazais amerove v'hodika toriso dinamo alayhu. The Gemara asks, with regard to the blessing recited on the cooked dish with pieces less than an olive bulk in volume, what is halachic conclusion? What halachic conclusion was reached about it? Rav Sheshet says, even when eating pieces of bread that do not have the volume of an olive bulk, one recites the blessing of who brings forth bread from the earth. Rava said, and this is limited to a case where the crumbs still have the appearance of bread and they did not dissolve completely.